Until now, the JavaScript code on our web pages has run as soon as the page is loaded, pausing only if we include a call to a function like alert or confirm. But we don't always necessarily want all of our code to run as soon as the page loads. What if we want some code to run after a delay or in response to something the user does? In this chapter, we'll look at different ways of modifying when our code is run. Programming in this way is called interactive programming. This will let us create interactive web pages that change over time and respond to actions by the user. Instead of having JavaScript execute a function immediately, you can tell it to execute a function after a certain period of time. Delaying a function like this is called setting a timeout. To set a timeout in JavaScript, we use the function setTimeout. This function takes two arguments as shown in figure 101, the function to call after the time has elapsed and the amount of time to wait in milliseconds. Figure 10:1. T. Key arguments for setTimeout. The following listing shows how we could use setTimeout to display an alert dialog. Var timeUp equals function. Alert times up. Setamount timeUp, 3000. If we create the function timeUp, which opens an alert dialog that displays the text times up. We call setTimeout with two arguments, the function we want to call timeUp, and the number of milliseconds 3000. To wait before calling that function, W. Are essentially saying, wait 3 seconds and then call timeUp. When setAmount timeUp, 3000, is first called, nothing happens, but after 3 seconds timeUp is called and the alert dialog pops up. Notice that calling setTimeout returns 1. T. His return value is called the timeout ID. The timeout ID is a number that's used to identify this particular timeout, that is, this particular delayed function call. T. The actual number returned could be any number, since it's just an identifier. C. I'll set timeout again, and it should return a different timeout ID, as shown here. Setamount timeUp, 5000. 2. You can use this timeout ID with the clear timeout function to cancel that specific timeout. W. I'll look at that next. Once you've called setTimeout to set up a delayed function call, you may find that you don't actually want to call that function after all. For example, if you set an alarm to remind you to do your homework, but you end up doing your homework early, you'd want to cancel that alarm. To cancel a timeout, use the function clearTimeout on the timeout ID returned by setTimeout. For example, say we create a do your homework alarm like this. var do homework alarm equals function. Alert, hey, you need to do your homework. Var timeout ID equals setTimeout. Do homework alarm, 60,000. The function do homework alarm pops up an alert dialog telling you to do your homework. When we call setAmount do homework alarm, 60,000, we're telling JavaScript to execute that function after 60,000 milliseconds or 60 seconds has passed. We make this call to setTimeout and save the timeout ID in a new variable called timeout ID. To cancel the timeout, pass the timeout ID to the clearTimeout function like this. clearTimeout. Timeout ID. Now setTimeout won't call the do homework alarm function after all. The setInterval function is like setTimeout, except that it repeatedly calls the supplied function after regular pauses, or intervals. For example, if you wanted to update a clock display using JavaScript, you could use setInterval to call an update function every second. You call setInterval with two arguments, the function you want to call and the length of the interval in milliseconds, as shown in figure 10:2. Figure 10 to 2. T. Key arguments for set interval. Here's how we could write a message to the console every second. Var counter equals 1. Var print message equals function console. Log you have been staring at your console for counter seconds. Counter var intervalid equals set interval. Print message 1000. You have been staring at your console for 1 second. You have been staring at your console for 2 seconds. You have been staring at your console for 3 seconds. You have been staring at your console for 4 seconds. You have been staring at your console for 5 seconds. You have been staring at your console for 6 seconds. Clear interval intervalid. And we create a new variable called counter and set it to 1. I'll be using this variable to keep track of the number of seconds you've been looking at your console. And we create a function called print message. T. This function does 2 things. First, it prints out a message telling you how long you have been staring at your console. T. Pen. Ed. It increments the counter variable. Next, we call set interval, passing the print message function in the number 1000. C. Calling set interval like this means call print message every 1000 milliseconds. Just as set timeout returns a timeout ID, set interval returns an interval ID, which we save in the variable intervalid. We can use this interval ID to tell JavaScript to stop executing the print message function. T. This is what we do using the clear interval function. Try it out. Modify the preceding example to print the message every 5 seconds instead of every second. Offset left 100 would place the heading element 100 pixels from the left side of the page. And we increment the left offset variable by 1. To make sure the heading doesn't move too far, we check to see if left offset is greater than 200, and if it is, we reset it to 0. Finally, we call set interval. And for its arguments we pass in the function move heading in the number 30 for 30 milliseconds. This code calls the move heading function every 30 milliseconds, or about 33 times every second. Each time move heading is called, the left offset variable is incremented, and the value of this variable is used to set the position of the heading element. Because the function is constantly being called and left offset is incremented by 1 each time, the heading gradually moves across the screen by 1 pixel every 30 milliseconds. Try it out. You can speed up this animation by raising the amount that left offset is increased every time move heading is called, or by reducing the time that set interval waits between calls to move heading. How would you double the speed that the heading moves? Try it with both techniques. What difference do you see? As you've seen, one way to control when code is run is with